I've begun to form a list of the most disturbing films to watch while in quarantine. And by a long stretch, Safe is definitely at the top. Truly an unsettling film to watch from a disease that feels both everywhere and nowhere. Even after 25 years since its release, the longevity of Todd Haynes' masterpiece has remained relevant in its discourse of isolation, post-industrial culture, disturbing plagues, and new meanings to the idea of health and immunity. (1987). This year is a distinct choice for Todd Haynes for many reasons. The film challenges ideas of disease prevention and health in a decade where the nation saw epidemics like AIDS as a punchline for many jokes. More than 50,000 Americans were diagnosed with AIDS between 1981 and 1987. According to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, 95.5% of those people that contracted the disease died from it. The numbers of sick and dead would spike in the years that followed. Todd Haynes' Safe falls squarely between two other films in the filmmaker's body of work that feature the same basic premise. A suburban white woman suffocates under social and structural pressures. In fact, Safe, Superstar, the Karen Carpenter story, and Far From Heaven evoke the 1940s and 50s idea of womanhood, which has since given Haynes a reputation as a queer restylist of melodrama. In keeping with that genre, Safe has a seemingly mundane storyline. A well-to-do housewife, Carol White, played by Julianne Moore, lives with her husband and her stepson. Haynes introduces us to her surroundings and what's familiar to her. When the camera arrives at Carol's home, it pauses while an electronic gate yields to admit the Mercedes-Benz that is carrying her back to the gracious modern living space and comfortable life that will, in short order, begin trying to kill her. Though notably lethargic, Carol appears generally healthy at the start of the film, but she becomes increasingly sensitive to everyday toxins. From car fumes to cleaning products, she experiences frequent coughing fits while driving. All of this appears to be benign, as her doctor insists nothing is the matter.
I'll see you in a couple weeks. You'll be fine.
Thanks.
Gradually, however, her symptoms become worse. Bouts of nosebleeds and vomits develop into fits and seizures until she's prompted to join a new age facility that keeps her isolated from the outdoor chemical pollution, which she believes causes her allergic reactions. While Carol faces her invisible opponent that leaves her weak, confused, and without any real avenue of retreat, she's also gradually forced to come to terms with her new identity. Before she contracts the mysterious illness, the film shows us a glimpse of what Carol's life was. She's breathy and passive, and somehow all the more indistinct for being so beautiful. Her friends from her aerobics class notice with playful envy that she doesn't ever sweat.
No, Carol, you do not sweat. Oh, I hate you.
I know, it's true.
No, it's great.
Superficial friendships coupled with a passionless marriage, Carol floats through her days, and in a white silken robe on sleepless nights, through her icy Kubrickian home, like a ghost. There is a constant sense of unease, even before Carol physically shows her symptoms. Characters are mostly framed in impersonal long and mid shots during lengthy, static takes, emphasizing the emotional distance between them. The film's visual style is often eerie and frigid, especially within Carol's fashionable suburban home. Now, the film doesn't lay out an obvious cause for Carol's breakdown. While there are notable examples that Carol is allergic to modern life, that her existence, surrounded by wealth and commodities, still cannot make up for the emptiness she experiences. On face value, and with an unfamiliar horror, she does suffer from extreme sensitivity triggered by everyday chemicals. Maybe the true horror is that her illness is inexplicable, and that surrounded by these everyday chemicals, regardless of how stable one's life is, taps into the fear that it could, without warning, deeply oppress anyone at any time.
So what you're saying, Carol, is that this is based solely on the pesticide and nothing else.
have a chemical impairment that makes
I realize that, Carol, but it's just not turning up on the tests.
Her doctors are helpless. She has a husband who's too preoccupied to offer support, and with Renwood's wellness community offering some retreat.
It is a real problem, and I think more and more people are becoming aware because more and more people are becoming sick from chemicals.
Nestled in the foothills of Albuquerque, the Renwood Center describes itself as a non-profit communal settlement dedicated to the healing individual.
But ultimately puts the blame on her.
Like this.
Now, nobody out there made you sick. You know that. The only person who can make you get sick is you, right? Whatever the sickness, if our immune system is damaged, it's because we have allowed it to be.
Carol learns that her affliction, whatever it is fundamentally her fault and can only be cured by loving herself. That is, by embracing her poisoner and tormentor more fully. I mentioned earlier that Carol attempts to come to terms with her new identity. In Renwood's wellness community, Carol seeks to understand those around that can relate with her. We learn that Renwood's methods of wellness deals with a language of ritual, self-wounding shame, and suffocating individualism.
I've stopped reading the papers. I've stopped watching the news on TV. Because if I really believe that life is that devastating, that destructive, I'm afraid that my immune system will believe it too. And I can't afford to take that risk. Neither can you.
Towards the climax, we see Carol enter her porcelain-lined igloo on the community's grounds. The film leaves Carol in a rare close shot staring into a mirror, uncertainly saying, "I love you," to her own reflection. This ending is more of an inverted ending compared to the Hollywood cinematic happy ending. In an interview with Film Comment in 2015, Haynes says, "For her to say 'I love you' in the mirror should feel like something has resolved, but all the film language and safe should be telling you that nothing is resolved, and unmistakably feels like a moment of defeat, particularly because we see how little Carol has left. A tiny, sanitized, bleak room in a community run by a sadist who only offers blame by calling it love, and is left with the absurd task of healing herself." Returning to the real world for a moment, and after reminding the public about
avoiding large gatherings and hand washing and all of the other things that...
and remarking that he'd like to open things up by Easter. While he was president and in March 2020, Trump offered a brief pep talk to the American people.
In order to defeat the virus, we must continue to be very strong. Your resilience and spirit has been inspiring to everyone, and I'm very proud to be your president. I can tell you that. Stay focused and stay strong. And
while I'm not strictly bashing the power of positive thinking, it's certainly remarkable how easy and how it's routinely the only response that those in power have offered for many years. What makes a person strong or weak for that matter? Not only ingrained in American politics, but so much of the culture has dedicated time into mistaking strength for actual merit, while we also reprimand weakness and further punish those who have been made weak. We just keep on coming up with new ways to say the same things. Throughout the film, Carol and many like her who suffer from extreme conditions are blatantly ignored. They're called crazy even, and their specific illnesses are never taken seriously. The film language eerily recreates the same ignorance we are familiar with today. Safe has stayed not just unsettling but queasily current. The film is an interesting look at society's imprecise notions of health and well-being. Then as now, there's also discourse of immunity and peril as we fight plague after plague. In large part, the culture and the politics, not only in the film, but existing now, are incapable of acting with empathy where there is weakness. And now that we're coming close to what's been a year since the pandemic, safe while in quarantine from a disease that feels both everywhere and nowhere, and which is being willfully misunderstood by powerful people who can't quite care enough to fight it. This film tells us a lot about ourselves than one might think.
If I told you that the end of the world was coming, and if you said to me that you get down on your knees and you pray, I'd say you're in trouble. Because when I go to bed and I pull up those covers under my neck, I say, Jesus, I'll see you in the morning.